Good evening, everybody. I was just trying to get unmuted. So I think hopefully everybody can hear me now. It's 7 o'clock and it's gotten very quiet, so I assume it's time to get going. So good evening, welcome, and thank you for joining us for our building update tonight, which the purpose of is to provide everyone with some information and updates on our plans to reopen the building. So as you can see for the agenda tonight, I'm going to kick it off, and then Rabbi Peltz will be giving us a Devar Torah. Then Ron will give us an update on the building and reopening procedures. We'll have a medical update from Dr. Seth Rosenbaum. And then what the real part of this program that we wanted to do is open it up for Q&A and take as many questions as we can from you tonight. So if you haven't submitted a question, I would ask that you simply put the question into the chat, which is located on the bottom of your screen. And we will then be able to take a look at them and hopefully get to all of your questions for you tonight. So as we get going, the one thing that I would ask that you keep in mind as we go through this process, that we all have a lot of questions, and right now there are a lot more questions than there are answers. However, I will say that our number one priority is the safety and health of our congregants, and we will not do anything that we feel could expose anyone to unnecessary risk. So as we kind of kick this off, as you know, back in March, we closed the building. And then in May, we started to put together a building reopening task force. Just to kind of give you a little bit of information on that, the members of the task force consist of Rabbi Peltz, our senior rabbi, our executive director, Ron Safir, Alex Weinberg, our director of congregational learning, Ellen Berjou, who is our director of our early childhood education program, Bernie Koval, who is a vice president and also oversees House and Grounds, Marty Chazen, who is our president-elect, Howard Silverstone, our treasurer, Greg Bannett, our ritual committee chair, Shirley Fagenbaum, our funds development chair, and then we also added Dr. Seth Rosenbaum, who is an infectious disease specialist and the chief medical officer of the RWJ Barnabas Healthcare System, and also Dr. Joel Kravitz, who is an emergency room doctor with the Capital Health System up in Trenton. And I should add that we are very fortunate at TBS that we have a congregation with many, many doctors and healthcare professionals who we have been speaking with and who we have been getting input from throughout this entire process as we're kind of going through this. Some of those people have provided input. There are a number of people that, doctors and healthcare professionals, who are involved in some of the additional task forces that we will talk about tonight. So we are getting input from a lot of different healthcare professionals as we go through this process. The purpose of the building reopening task force that we established is to establish policy and procedures as to how and when we could go about opening the building. And when we're doing this, the task force considers basically these following 5 criteria. One is state law, which is legally can we do things? Can we open? What are the laws that guide us to do things? 2 is we then look at the medical side of it and talk to our medical professionals as to what would work or what we could do. And if they pass those 2 criteria, then we then would consider things like, well, just because we can do something, should we do something? How would that look? What would the program be like? How would it come across? How can we engage members? Things like that. Throughout this process, there is a lot of focus on our budget and staying fiscally responsible. So we will look at costs, and we also look at logistics. What's involved in actually doing a program or a service or whatever we're thinking about doing. In addition to the building reopening task force, which serves as kind of an umbrella group, we have created a number of smaller subtask forces underneath that with have specific target areas that they focus on. So right now there's 3 of them. One is our high holiday task force, which obviously is focused on how are we going to present our high holidays and do that this year. Second is lifelong learning, which talks about our schools and our ECEC. And third is the Funds Development Task Force, which looks at the financial component of what type of revenue we have to replace versus what revenue will be lost, and how we can continue to work to make sure we're fiscally responsible in maintaining our budgets as we go through this entire process. So our goal tonight is to provide you with some more detailed information on our plans to move forward, and obviously answer as many questions that we can. But before I turn the program over to Rabbi Peltz, I just wanted to say how proud I am of our entire TBS community in how we have come together to support each other at this time. We look out for each other and even celebrate with each other, be it virtually on Zoom or in small groups, or just calling each other on the phone to check in. I think in an unexpected way, this virus has made our TBS family stronger, and I am confident that when all this is over, we will look back and feel good that we made decisions that put the health and safety of our congregants first, and that we made the right choices to ensure that TBS's future would be bright for many years to come. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to providing you with a lot of great information and then also getting to your questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Rabbi Peltz for the Devar Torah. Good evening, Rabbi.
Good evening, Steve, and Erev Tov, everybody. Good to see you all tonight. Just one second. There we go. It's good to see everybody tonight. And clearly the amount of people we have on this evening shows how much we care and are concerned about TBS and are want to feel that desire to be back together. As wonderful as it is seeing everybody virtually, which we get to do almost daily through our different classes and services and other experiences that we have throughout for all ages in our community, I imagine you feel like I do, and that you'd rather be in the spot right behind me, sitting together in the sanctuary in our building and being able to be together. And this has been a long stretch. You know, when we originally closed the building, like a lot of places, that'd be a couple weeks, right? A couple weeks, maybe after Pesach, you know, we'll have to come back together. And now we find ourselves in July, and we know that there's not a quick fix to this. And of course, guiding us through all this, in addition to the things that Steve said, or to emphasize one thing that Steve said, are our Jewish values here. And before I talk a little more specifically about that, I just want to note that this Shabbat is when we're to finish the reading of the book of Bamidbar, the fourth book of the Torah, the book of Numbers, which is the book that chronicles the 38-year journey of the Israelites through the wilderness. Of course, it was 40 years, but this book is 38 of it. And I have never found the book of Bamidbar, of wandering through the wilderness, more resonant than I have this year. As the book is a book of transitions, it's a book of faith and lost faith, it's a book of turmoil, but it's also a book of hope. We know there are many complaints and arguments and uncertainty that the Israelites face in the desert, and a lot of loss as well over the course of that time in the desert. But what guides them through is that pillar of fire by night and the pillar of cloud by day that represents God's presence. It's their community and their leadership by Moses and Miriam and Aaron. And it's also their values that help guide them through. And it really strikes me that this year we can feel a bit like those Israelites as we are on a road of uncertainty. It seems like right when things might be turning around, we hear something else. There's frustration with our leadership and trying to have clear guidelines and a sense of feeling like we're on the same page in this and moving forward together and combating this virus together. But we too, like the Israelites, are being guided by our values and also by the strength of each other. And it really has been wonderful to see the way in which so many in our TBS family have reached out to others and helped those in need. And we know there's more need out there, and we're doing our best to try to help everyone who is in need to the extent that we can. And we do ask if you or you know somebody who's in need of some groceries or a phone call or a check-in or anything, to please let us know, because that's what being part of a Kila Kadosha, a sacred community, caring community, is all about, to be there for us, be there for each other in the difficult moments, but also, God willing, in the joyous moments that we do still celebrate and we have celebrated together. Ultimately, we know that the most important value that we have that guides us through this is the value of human life, right? As I wrote at the beginning of this, when we read in the book of Leviticus that phrase, v'chai bahem, that God says we should live by our commandments. And the Talmud says we should live by them means that human life always comes first. And that's why what guides us most for all this is making sure that we can do the best we can to safeguard people's health, while at the same time recognizing at this point that if there are ways that the government and our medical professionals and we as a community feel that are safe to be able to come together in safe ways, that that's something that's important to help guard our lives too. So this is certainly not a science, it's more of an art. We are trying to guide all of you and all of us together through this as best as we can. And we appreciate your support, your patience, your questions with all of this. And we hope that tonight is the way in which that we can start to update you on what we've been doing in the building and other steps that we've taken and the processes we have in place in order to address this, and also ways in which we hope, though of course nothing's certain in our world today, like in the desert itself, that we hope that we can find ways and safe ways to be back together, b'mehera b'yameinu, as they say, speedily in our days. And so we're going to begin here. I'm going to pass it over to Ron. But before I do that, speaking of a little update in our building and what's going on there, Ron's prepared a little video to give you a little tour of what's been happening in the building since you've been gone. So let me pass it over to that.
Hello, welcome. It's great to see you. It's been a long time. I hope you can see in my eyes the smile under this mask. Come on in. But first, we just need to ask everybody a few questions before entering the building. Have you tested positive for COVID-19? Have you been in contact with anyone who has tested positive? Have you experienced any symptoms of COVID-19, including fever or shortness of breath? Have you traveled to any COVID-19 hotspots in the last 14 days? No? Excellent. Just need to check your temperature. Nice. So, please, put on your mask, come inside, please sanitize or wash your hands, and let us show you how we've been preparing the building for our eventual reopening. This mission has not been impossible. Thank you for coming. It was great to see you again. Please help yourself to some hand sanitizer on your way out. We hope to see you again very soon.
Good evening, everyone. It is indeed great to see you, at least virtually. And we do hope to see you again soon in the building. And that's really what tonight is about, to show you and tell you what we have been doing to prepare for our eventual reopening and to address any questions you may have. As the coronavirus became increasingly prevalent earlier this year, TBS made the decision to close the building on Friday, March 13th, after consulting with medical professionals within our own community, including infectious disease experts and critical care experts. We made this decision to close even before the local school districts and other area synagogues made their own decisions to close, because we felt it was the right thing to do. We continue to follow the advice from various sources, such as the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, and the World Health Organization, the WHO, as well as local sources, such as the New Jersey Department of Health the Camden County Department of Health, and our internal medical professionals. As Rabbi Peltz mentioned, our initial messaging to the congregation regarding our building closure stated that TBS would remain closed for 2 weeks, that we would continue to monitor the situation, and we asked for patience and understanding as we navigate through these uncharted waters. Little did we know that we would remain closed for this long. In the weeks and months following our closure, we pledged that we would continue to keep the congregation updated on any new developments, and that we would continue to be socially connected, physically distant, and spiritually close. And we have. There are multiple Zoom sessions daily, offering a wide variety of programming, classes, and services to keep us connected. And I cannot express enough, how proud I am of our clergy, our educators, and our staff for all the online programming they have been able to provide our TBS community every single day during our building closure. I have noted in the weekly emails that as more restrictions are starting to be lifted, and as we slowly start to resume to a life of normalcy, we are preparing for reopening, but we will do so cautiously and not prematurely. The security, health, and safety of our entire TBS community remain our top priority, and all our decisions have been based on that premise. And it is now time to shift the conversation from building closure to building reopening, and we are slowly getting there. We have had 2 B'nai Mitzvahs here in recent weeks, outside on the property, right over here, outside my window by the school entrance, with limited attendance of immediate family only. And we recently hosted a Red Cross blood drive here inside the building. We hope to resume our infant and toddler daycare program in August, our Eric B. Jacobs Early Childhood Education Center in early September, along with our Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis Religious School and Hamakom High School. You should have received our communication about our decision to not have in-person services for the High Holy Days, because it is simply not feasible to have large gatherings such as that at this time. But we do hope to resume in-person Shabbat services with limited attendance in the not too distant future. I use the term "we hope to resume" for each of these aspects of our synagogue because we do not have definitive dates for each of these openings to share with you tonight, but rather general timeframes for our hopes of reopening each aspect of our synagogue. We will communicate to you more specific dates as we have them in the weeks to come, but we are certainly preparing. And as you saw from the video, we have been doing a lot behind the scenes to get us ready. And several of our corporate sponsors have helped us with this process, including Max Janitorial, who worked alongside our maintenance staff to clean, sanitize, and disinfect the entire building. SaniPros, who is here in their hazmat suits to apply a product called BioProtect throughout the entire building. BioProtect is proven to eradicate COVID-19 on surfaces. Minuteman Press supplied us with our new signage and floor decals throughout the building, reminding everyone that masks are required at all times while in the building and the importance of social distancing and hand washing. You saw in the video our facility manager, Steve McGowan, utilizing one of our brand new sanitizing fogger spray machines as part of our new normal of regular maintenance. And we will also be utilizing sanitizing fogger canisters in the evening to sanitize the hard-to-reach areas. We have increased the number of antibacterial stations around the synagogue and school, and wall-mounted hand sanitizers have been installed throughout the building, including the front lobby, the sanctuary lobby, outside the gift shop, the school lobby, the school wing, and the main office. We are modifying and enhancing our daily cleaning and sanitation protocols and reminding and training staff on procedures for sanitizing all areas of our school and synagogue. We installed clear protective barriers in various areas of the building. We are increasing our supplies of sanitizing and disinfecting products and personal protection equipment known as PPEs to ensure adequate supply, some of which were displayed in the video, including CDC-approved COVID-19 sanitizing sprays face masks for both adults and children, disinfecting wipes, sanitizing gel, face shields, gloves, and touchless thermometers. And I also think it is worth mentioning that we have stayed in close contact with local law enforcement to ensure that our building is monitored frequently during our closure. You may have seen in the weekly emails my comments that hopefully we will soon get back to our regular routines, that hopefully things will get back to normal soon. But our new normal will be just that, new and different. As you saw in the video, when you come to the building, you will be asked certain screening questions and you will have your temperature checked. And you will be required to wear a face covering the entire time you are in the building and distance yourself from those who are not a part of your household. Our new normal, for the near future anyway. As you would imagine, there are many things to consider as we look towards reopening our building, including logistical considerations, in addition to health and safety considerations. Reopening requires careful preparation, smart coordination, good communication, and monitoring of our progress. We need to address not just the health, safety, timing, and logistics of the reopening of our building, but also all the activities that take place within our building, including the resumption of in-person services, our schools, programming, fundraising, and the high holy days, to name a few. As such, as Steve mentioned, a reopening task force with subgroups was created to address various considerations in preparation for our reopening, and this group has been meeting regularly. Alex has convened a lifelong learning reopening task force led by Melissa Brown to address considerations for reopening our ECEC, Religious School, and Hamakom Hebrew High School. Alex is the liaison to that committee with recommendations from the umbrella reopening task force committee. Alex and the Lifelong Learning Reopening Task Force have done an amazing job in their vision and preparation for what the schools will look like in the fall. An announcement went out last night to all of our Rabbi Albert and Sarah Lewis religious school families, announcing the introduction of a new program called First at TBS, which is a hybrid learning model. First at TBS takes the best of the religious school program that we know and love and restructures it in a safe format for our families by blending the best of online and digital learning with occasional in-person experiences. Families will have occasional in-person touch points throughout the year in a safe and structured format. There will be distance learning for kindergarten through 6th grade with classes on Sundays from 9 to 10, self-paced lessons and challenges for grades 2 through 6, matched with a virtual Wednesday from 4 to 4:30 class check-in, fun enrichment programming and learning with our clergy, Shabbat at home to bring Shabbat into the homes of our families that includes services, Shabbat table experiences, and more, and Home for the Holidays, Adventure Challenge for celebrating the High Holy Days and transitioning back into a secular school schedule. Our ECEC task force, led by Dr. Eileen Burak, is meeting weekly to review and implement state health policies with the goal of getting the daycare program for infants and toddlers open by the middle of August and the goal of opening the ECEC by the first week in September, including a kindergarten class, and enrollment is ongoing. Ellen Biergiu and her staff have been amazing with providing online learning programs for the children, and Ellen is working with our state rep to make sure we are in compliance with all regulations, and a communication will be going out this week to share our progress. Staff training will begin in July for teachers on new regulations. Our Hamakom Hebrew High School Task Force, led by Allison Arking, is meeting every other week and has been working on a hybrid learning model for our families, focusing on the core mission of Hamakom for dynamic classes, hands-on social action and learning, and they are exploring joint experiences with Beth El's High School. We have gone through various phases of operations during this pandemic, 10 different phases to be exact. Phase 1 was the week of March 9th. TBS senior management team consulting with various medical professionals to determine next steps in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Phase 2, that happened on Friday, March 13th. I remember that day very well. TBS made the decision to close the building due to widespread cases of COVID-19 and moved to providing programming, classes, and services exclusively online. All office staff, clergy, and faculty will work remotely from home until further notice. Phase 3 was the week of March 16th, where TBS maintenance staff and outside cleaning crews were present for the entire week to clean, sanitize, and disinfect the entire building. Phase 4 was the week of March 23rd, when certain TBS administrative staff were allowed in the building at staggered times to process payments, donations, and payroll, basically to keep the business operations of the synagogue going. Masks and social distancing were required for anyone entering the building. Phase 5 was the April-May period, where we started the purchasing of personal protection equipment, the PPEs, including all the items that were discussed a few moments ago. Phase 6 was in the May-June timeframe, where construction contractors were allowed in the building to perform essential repairs in the sanctuary and begin renovation of our Beit Midrash. Phase 7 is the current phase that we're in, the mid-June, July timeframe, where outdoor in-person services with bar and bat mitzvahs of 10 attendees plus clergy. We hosted 2 b'nai mitzvahs here so far. We also hosted the Red Cross blood drive and the primary election polling. So that's kind of the phase we're in right now. Phase 8 is moving into the target opening dates of daycare for infants and toddlers in August upon completion of implementing the guidelines set forth by the New Jersey Department of Health and the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. Phase 9 is the target opening of our ECEC and religious school in early September. In phase 10, the target resumption of indoor, in-person services in September with certain protocols and guidelines for entry into the building to be communicated to the congregation in advance. There's actually a phase 11, if needed, and we hope we don't get to it. But phase 11 would be if there's a second wave of COVID-19 and the pandemic necessitates the building closure based on recommendations from medical professionals and government agencies. If we have to go to phase 11, that means we revert all the way back to phase 2 with closing the building again and going back to a strictly online environment. So we will hope and pray for the best, and we are now better prepared for the worst. In closing, I just want to say that we will continue to be fully transparent in our communications with you, and we will continue to communicate with you weekly. We have been hearing terms that just a short time ago were not part of our daily conversations, such as social distancing, stay home and save lives, stay 6 feet apart, stop the spread, flattening the curve, and many others. We're hearing about challenging times, trying times, and unprecedented times as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, also known as COVID-19. Yes, these are uncertain and challenging times indeed, but together we will continue to achieve our mission to be a welcoming and inclusive sacred community that connects its members to one another, Judaism, and Israel through interactive spiritual, educational, and social experiences. That mission is possible only with your support. So please submit your membership renewal ASAP if you haven't already. With that, I will now turn it over to Dr. Seth Rosenbaum, who will share with us some updates from a medical standpoint. Seth?
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that introduction. First and foremost, I want to thank TBS. I want to thank Rabbi Peltz, Rabbi Wexler, Cantor Cohen, Ron, Steve Bornstein, Alex Weinberg for their dedication and commitment that they have provided to the organization in regards to not only closing, but the reopening and the strategic operational aspect of trying to figure out how we're going to do so in a very safe and responsible fashion. I want to give a brief overview of the landscape of coronavirus as it pertains to us in New Jersey, and a little bit of more to us in Camden County, and then more specifically to what we're doing at TBS locally. As of tonight in New Jersey, there were a total of 176,278 cases of COVID-19. Unfortunately, 13,691 of those are actual fatalities. In the infectious disease world, we deal with something called the transmission rate, and that's basically a factor that determines if I was to be infected, how many people would I infect? And the rate right now is 1. To give you some perspective, when we started having the peak in mid-April, that number was over 5, upwards of 6. So for every 1 person that was infected, 6 more people would be infected. So we're starting to see a decline here in New Jersey. Unfortunately, that doesn't go for some other states in the Bible Belt in the South as well, where we're starting to see a lot of hotspots and a rise of cases, which is unfortunately causing quite a lot of concern. Our hospitals, the 71 hospitals in the state of New Jersey, currently there are 862 people hospitalized with COVID, or what we call under investigation. 146 of those are our intensive care unit, 64 on the mechanical ventilators. And to put that in a perspective, back in April 13th, 2,070 people were in the ICU and over 1,700 were on ventilators. So we are starting to see a very good decline in the numbers, and that will move me towards where we're going to go with Governor Murphy in the stage 2 of the reopening process. However, Governor Murphy recently put a pause on some of the reopening. Interestingly enough, in Camden County, there were 7,786 cases, 502 confirmed fatalities, a significant decrease in hospitalizations, as well as ICU admissions and ventilator patients. A staggering number, which is quite concerning to me and to the public health epidemiologists, is that the number 1 age bracket for people infected with COVID-19 currently is the 30 to 49-year-old bracket, and that represents over 31% of all cases of COVID at the current time, which is a complete shift in the pandemic, where when we started this whole thing, it was the higher age brackets, the 55 to 65, even higher. So we're starting to see the millennials have a higher increased incidence of COVID, which begs the belief of whether or not social distancing is being followed by millennials, whether masking is being followed. So we really need to continue that. Stage 2 is currently on a pause cycle for Governor Murphy, just because we're starting to see a creep in that rate of transmission. We are seeing an increase in number of people coming from other states, and that's why there was the watch list that Governor Murphy put on in regards to quarantining for 14 days. So there are a lot of things going on in the state of New Jersey that really we need to keep an eye on, especially as we reopen childcare, education, etc. We at TBS need to do this in a responsible fashion, as well as a safe fashion, as Ron and Rabbi and Steve have alluded to. We also need to find that fair balance between, or the fine balance between, the keeping our Jewish beliefs in check, as well as keeping our traditions in check. But also we want to get back to the synagogue in a safe fashion. We all want to get back into our congregation. We all want to get back to our services, but we need to do it in a safe and responsible fashion. These decisions have been quite difficult. However, they've been made under evidence-based guidelines, evidence-based medicine. These follow the CDC, the WHO, the New Jersey Department of Health. Many organizations have put out guidelines and documents which we've incorporated so nicely into the reopening process here at TBS. It is a very fluid situation, so we all just need to realize that things change every day, every hour, and we might need to change some of our recommendations as we have done in the past. So we need you all to be patient and understanding that these things will change quite often, but they're changing in the interest of your safety and your health. We ask for your patience and understanding while we all navigate these waters, these uncharted waters. We have never had a pandemic in our lifetime like this. This is very interesting, although it is very concerning. We know that your safety is paramount to us. We want to make sure when you come back, you feel comfortable and safe. The TBS leadership and staff and clergy has done an exceptional job in implementing policies and procedures to safeguard you all when you come back. So when you do come back, you feel safe and comfortable in the congregations that you attend. But please, we really need your cooperation and assistance when we do open and when we continue to reopen, that you understand that we might need to change things and back off and pump the brakes a few times if things start to change and the government starts to see a tick up of cases. However, at this point, I feel that we are doing the right thing. We're doing it methodically, and we're doing a systematic approach in a safe and responsible pattern. Ultimately, we will all be back in the synagogue at some point. We just need to take our time and take baby steps and make sure we do it responsibly. So I thank you for your time. I think now we'll move forward to the questions and answer portion of the program.
Thank you, Seth. Appreciate that update, and Ron and Rabbi for all the information. I will ask that I have a number of questions that we're going to start to just ask around to the panel, so to speak. And if you have some questions, if you just go into the chat and type a question into the chat, then we can look at those as well. And Seth, since we left off with you, I will start with you. A lot of the questions, a number of questions here are just talking about health screenings and how that will work. So I'll give you a two-part question to start off with. First of that is when we come to the building, who will be doing the screenings in the building? How will that kind of work? And there's a follow-up to that if you want regarding temperature. So if I do come to the building and I have a temperature, what is considered a temperature, and I guess what is not? And we will unmute you in a second. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, great questions. So people, the screeners, will be at the synagogue awaiting people entering. And the screeners will be employees of TBS. They will be properly trained employees at TBS. They will be trained based upon the CDC's guidance, as well as the Children and Family Services guidance that Alex and his team have arranged as well too. They are a set of questions that are evidence-based, and these are the questions that Ron actually alluded to in this video in the beginning. So these questions are set. They will take a temperature, and if they have a fever of over 100.4, which is the temperature you're asking for, they unfortunately will be asked to be leaving the premises and follow up with their physician for further evaluation.
All right, great. I know one of the other big questions that everyone has is regarding high holidays. So I'll go to you, Rabbi Peltz. And here's there's a couple of questions that came in regarding high holidays. Obviously, we sent out the announcement last week. But people want to know about plans for shofar blowing. Obviously, I know that's near and dear to my heart, and it's a big part of what people experience during Rosh Hashanah. So how is that going to work? And just kind of talk a little bit about services and what we can expect as we're kind of putting our plan together for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Sure. So first of all, something to make clear is we're in the process of installing cameras in our Beit Midrash and in our sanctuary. So when we do go back there eventually, we will be live streaming our services and what happens in the sanctuary, whatever is going to be happening in sanctuary, whenever that is. So for those who are immunocompromised or in a high-risk population or not comfortable coming out, you will still be able to continue to participate in the services virtually. From now onward, we're going to keep those cameras in and live streaming something we're going to start doing for our services. When it comes to the high holidays, we're very happy to be part of the 9 synagogues in our community who made this difficult yet in some ways easy decision. Easy because we know the reality out there, and having 2,000 people plus in our sanctuary is just, there's no way that's safe to do these days. But difficult, of course, because it is the high holidays, right? And it's hard to be a part as it is, and especially on the holidays themselves. So we have been working quite a bit to figure out how we'll be doing the services this year. What we're going to be putting together is a plan, and we've begun to put together specific things for those days that I'll get to in a moment, but also thinking about how we can engage as a community throughout the holiday season. So for example, some of the opportunities we'll have is we hope beginning in the month of Elul, on the first day of Elul, which is about August 20th, families will be able to sign up for times to safely come into the synagogue and come to the open ark like we do during the Ne'ilah part of the service, to meet with one of the clergy in a socially distanced manner with mass and be able to go into the sanctuary and have a private moment by the ark. So people will have the opportunity to at least get in the sanctuary in that sense, or as we approach the holidays themselves. We also have our membership committee and our ritual committee are working on high holiday boxes that will be delivered to everyone in the congregation. Those will have a number of ritual resources like machzorim, for example, also some fun high holiday activities as well that'll be in there too. These will be personally delivered to every member of our congregation, as a way to have a non-touch touch point with someone in the congregation, but also as a way to help prepare for a very different type of holiday season. So those will be coming too, in addition to all the usual learning that we do leading up to the holidays, with some special prep as well about creating sacred spaces at home and some other things like that. In terms of the days themselves, we will be broadcasting from the sanctuary the high holidays. We're going to be working with a professional company that's going to help us do that to make sure that the technology will work as best as it can work, and the sound is as good as the sound can be, and all of that. And this year the holidays are going to be different. And as hard as that is, we also think, like everything this year, and I think everything in our lives, is to try to see them as an opportunity to connect in a different way to the high holidays this year. Services, of course, listen, I'll be the first one to say, are an important way to connect to God and to the holidays. But of course, the words of our prayers are meant to get us to those important themes of tshuva, of repentance, of tzedakah, of charity, of tefillah, of prayer. And there are many ways in which we can do those things, amongst other themes as well. So we're going to be finding ways during the service themselves to help engage you at home through different ways in which we can broadcast the service to help engage people in doing that. We hope we would like to find ways to get together smaller groups to do some shofar blowing outside. Right now, 2 months in advance, knowing how quickly our world changes, we're hopeful that we'll be able to do that, but we'll be relying on the guidance that we're given in order to be able to do those things. Same thing with tashlich, right? About throwing the bread into the river on Rosh Hashanah. That's something else. That'll be an opportunity to come together outside. And when I say come together, it will be with mass. It will be socially distanced. It'll be with all those precautions that we say. And it'll also have to be signed off on first, of course, by the governor and by our medical professionals, and making sure all these pieces are safe. We really think that, this year, is a way in which we can all engage with the holidays differently. And we hope that too, I'll say, I know some of you come at the very beginning of the service and leave at the very end of the service. Some of you might come a little late and leave a little early, or find ways in which to connect to the to be part of the service. We really hope this year that you'll stay longer perhaps than you normally will. You don't have to deal with the parking, you don't have to deal with the bus, you don't have to deal with all those different pieces. Which becomes an opportunity to be able to be home, to be with your family, to be part of the services themselves, and maybe get to hear some prayers that you wouldn't normally hear, or experiencing things you wouldn't normally experience. We're also mindful of the setting, right? And that when it is virtual, these experiences can be hard to focus in on. So we're going to be tailoring our services in a way that we think is going to be most successful and accessible for people to be able to participate and to be a part of the service themselves. So we're continuing to work on this and to figure out the details on all of it. But we're looking forward to working with you and creating a high holiday experience this year like no other you've had before, but one that I think which will have many opportunities if we open ourselves up to it, to be able to connect to the holidays themes in different ways this year.
Very good. Thank you, Rabbi. And I'll say, after the email and the announcement went out, we received many emails in response to it, and they were all very positive and supportive of the decision, that we were making the right decisions. So that was really comforting to get that. I got a couple of questions that came in regarding procedures, Ron. So I'm gonna go to you now, and I'll give you a two-part question. One is there a capacity to the building? Do we have a maximum number of people that are allowed in the building at any one time? And the second part regarding a procedure would be, what happens if somebody is in the building and then is identified as someone who has COVID? How would we handle that as far as contact tracing, notifications, and things like that? If you could talk a little bit about the policy and procedure for that.
Right. So I'll answer the second one first. You might remember, I think it was March 10th, maybe? Was that a Tuesday, March 10th? Was that the day that we hosted the event for the ADL? We were notified by the ADL a week or so later, that an individual who attended that event tested positive for COVID. So what we did at that time, and what I imagine we would do again, is send out a notification to the entire congregation that an individual who attended a certain event or service tested positive for COVID-19, and they should address that accordingly. So there has been conversation about contact tracing, identifying who's attending various services and programs in order to then contact them if somebody is indeed has indeed tested positive for COVID. But these are things that the reopening task force is still looking at and will be determined. But certainly, if we're notified that somebody who has attended one of our events or services subsequently test positive, we will certainly notify the congregation as such. What was the first question about capacity?
Yeah, is there, have we set any, or are there any standards that were for building capacity?
Right. So, this comes back to the whole concept of can versus should, right? So, there are certain numbers and guidelines that the state is saying we're allowed to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is something we should do. We have not yet outlined and identified the exact number of people that we will allow in the building. I can tell you that initially we will have very small numbers. I mean, even with the 2 outdoor B'nai Mitzvahs that we did recently, we limited that to just immediate family, 10 guests to attend the service. I believe the number right now for the state is upwards of, and Seth, correct me if I'm wrong, upwards of 500 for outdoor gatherings. But what the state says we can do is different than what we think we should do. So again, we're proceeding very cautiously, and we don't want to jump into anything prematurely. The reopening task force is going to continue to address this upon recommendations from our medical professionals, as well as what the state is saying we can do. As we get closer to determining the in-person services, we will certainly communicate to the congregation. For indoor services, we will certainly communicate what's allowed, and we still have to determine the exact procedure on how we will do that, and how many we will allow, and if we need to pre-schedule attendees. So these are just some of the things that the reopening task force has been thinking about, but nothing has been determined yet. But we will certainly communicate that in the weeks to come as we go along.
Fantastic. I see, I'll stick with you here, Ron, just because there's a lot of building procedural type questions and stuff like that. So while we're on that topic, procedures for staff members, staff, professional staff, or just teachers, faculty working in the building, for screening them. Is there anything that they're going to be subjected to, or have to, have regular screenings, testing, what have you, that would be different than just a guest or a congregant walking in the building for just any other purpose?
No, staff and faculty will be subjected to the same type of screening that everybody else coming into the building will be. And we've done temperature checks on staff already. So I don't see a difference there. I think anybody entering the building, should be subjected to the same screening. Whether it's a congregant or whether it's a staff member. And again, these are things that, the reopening task force is going to continue to address.
But there's not any additional requirements on staff that we have, the state guidelines say that, like, for example, a teacher needs a higher level of screening or testing than anyone else walking in the building.
Right. Well, we don't have Alex and Ellen on the panel tonight. They've been much closer to the state regulations on those pieces. But that's certainly something that, we can come back to. Not all questions are going to be able to be answered tonight. And I think what we can do going forward, whether we run out of time or we just don't have the answers right now, in the weekly emails and the weekly updates, we can look at these questions, post them with the answers. Just because, we're doing this town hall session tonight doesn't mean that this is where it ends. The questions are going to continue, no doubt about it, and we will continue to address them. So if we don't have specific answers to your questions tonight, we will continue to address them and post them.
Agreed. Yeah, there's, like, as I said, there's many more questions than we have answers to, and this is changing very quickly, and will continue to change. So we will definitely get to everybody's questions, or if we don't have the answers, we will find the answers for you. Rabbi, there is a question that has come in about outdoor minyan, or trying to schedule regular outdoor minions, given the fact that it's summer and it's at least the guidelines say it's easier to do things outside. So has there been any thought to trying to scheduling type of regular outdoor minion for people to gather?
Yeah, there has been thought about it. We haven't done it yet for a couple of reasons. One is, we want to continue to live stream what we do. We wouldn't have a minion at shul that couldn't be, live streamed, because we have to limit the amount of people there. And we want to make sure it's inclusive and wouldn't necessarily want to run two concurrent minyanim. And the truth is, the technology as we have it now to set up outside is very laborious, shall we say. I mean, for the 2 times we did it, it's quite an elaborate process. And one is getting it together for the 10 or 15 minute minion is a lot to put together, and we're working on that to try to figure out some easier solutions for it. 2, is something I think if we're able to get technology together, we'd be open to doing. I think we'd have to limit the amount of numbers. We have to do it in masks, and it kind of raises the question, I think, a little bit of the ought for this. And I think this is where we need to experiment a little bit. Davening together in masks and distanced. Is that the type of experience that we want to have? Perhaps that's, whether we want it or not, that's the type of experience that we are going to have these days. But in the meantime, at least as far as I've heard, and perhaps if there's different, I'm happy to get more emails on it. People are pretty content to do it over Zoom and to have it over Zoom and the technology there in their homes. And just given the uncertainties of the weather and the heat or the rain and all those different pieces of the scheduling and messaging, it keeps it simpler to just continue on that road. And
I'll follow up, since it's still on the topic of ritual, and that's your wheelhouse. There's a couple questions about bar and bat mitzvahs for the coming year. One came in with a person who is, I guess, scheduled for a family for an October bar mitzvah, and they're kind of trying to figure that out. So as we go into the, I guess, first half of the year, the fall, through December season for bar and bat mitzvah, how do you see us handling that, and how are we doing that currently, and how will that work out?
Yeah, good question. And Cantor Cohen has been doing a lot of work and a lot of wonderful work on this with families and working on figuring out what makes the most sense. What I'll say first is, my daughter's bat mitzvah is at the beginning of March. So I'm kind of in this boat too, and stuck in uncertainty. We hope by March things will be better, but who knows these days how it will be. So this question's my question as well. It's not only those who have children in that year. Listen, I think our hope is that we'll be able to be in the sanctuary with a limited number of people, with masks and et cetera, for the service, and be able to live stream that to the congregation, family, and friends that aren't able to be there. And we'll have to figure out the exact procedures about how we'll do the aliyot to the Torah and how we structure the service, because we're most likely not going to be able to stand as close as we normally would for an aliyah to the Torah and things like that. But that would be, in my mind, kind of the best case scenario at this point. But that will again be dependent on our advice and guidance and so on. I think the other possibility, like we did in May and June with a couple B'nai Mitzvah, is to do it over Zoom with people in their homes. which worked out very nicely, and is a very Simcha celebration for people to do it that way as well. And that's another option. And I think the further we get into the fall, the outdoor option is just harder to do for obvious reasons, right? When the weather's not good, even if there's a little bit of wind, it makes it a lot harder to hear, let alone rain and everything else. So I don't think, by the time we start Ber B'nai Mitzvah this year at the end of October, I don't think outside is really going to be an option. So, we are committed to making sure it's a meaningful experience, a joyful experience, a memorable experience for families. Hopefully we could do it with a limited number of people in the sanctuary, depending on what's happening in the world at that point, or else we can do it over Zoom together. And Kendra Cohen's going to be sending out more information about this very shortly for the families who have B'nai Mitzvah in the fall. And we'll continue to be in touch and to talk as we get closer to figure out what makes the most sense for everybody, and to make sure it's a good, joyous occasion for all of our families.
So thank you. The next question, I'll take the first part about it, and then I'm going to ask Seth to comment on the next piece. And the question came in is why is there just one physician involved in the planning? Well, there's really not. I mean, there's actually many physicians that are involved, as I said in my opening comments, that have been contributing, and we've been in contact with. There's a number of doctors and medical professionals that are on various task forces for the Lifelong Learning Committee. So we really are taking a lot of input from a lot of different places. But the reality is we can't have every doctor on the task force, because then it's just the whole congregation, and that's a lot of decision making and input, and it would slow down the productivity of that group. So that's kind of why we limited it. The one thing I will say regarding Seth is, one is he's a member of our board of directors. So he's part of the leadership of the congregation to begin with in that respect. And two, in his role as one being infectious disease specialist, and two being the chief medical officer of a health system, we felt gives us an upper hand on the knowing exactly what's going on, what the procedures are, what the guidelines are, and then being able to have them translate to what would work here at TBS. So the follow-up question, or another question, Seth, that came in regarding that is just, I guess, your opinion on how we're doing, I guess. The question is, do you think TBS has done a good job in preparing for the reopening? So as you're seeing what's going on in the hospital and in the health system that you're working on, and people that are doing, I guess, the right way, and things that are working and not working, how would you, I guess, look at the way TBS is going about it from a health and safety standpoint?
I think I said it from the beginning of my opening remarks. I think TBS has done a fantastic job. We were the front runners in closing our facility when others were not even thinking about closing or not even thinking about COVID. We have had regular meetings, whether they've been on Zoom or we've been on the phone, whether we've been emailing. You all have taken the right approach to reopening, as well as communications and transparency with the congregation. And that's the key when you have these pandemics, and when you have something going on that's uncertain, and when it's very anxiety ridden, you need to have open communication. You need to be transparent with your congregation members, because they're very nervous and they need to know. It's very difficult to have a lot of committees. It's very difficult to have a lot of committees with a lot of members. So that's why we try to scale it down, and several committees report up to other committees, and then we can report out at the higher level. We take the input from everybody, but there's only so many people that can be in a meeting, and there's so many stakeholders that can be involved, or else nothing will ever get accomplished, like you said. But comparing it to the hospital, it's a totally different animal, the hospital, the healthcare system versus the educational sector. And I think from what you all are doing, you're doing it the right way. You're following the guidelines. You're taking a safe, responsible approach to it. You're not taking anything haphazardly, and you're not doing anything carelessly. You're doing everything thoughtfully and doing it the right way. Kudos to everybody in TBS. I think we would have done it any different. We're doing it the right way.
Super. I have one last question, and we're aware of the time, so we know that a lot of people may want to jump over to Minyan. So that is coming up next on the next channel. This is kind of like a programming note. But the one question that came in, Ron, speaks to membership. A lot of concern about with not having high holidays in the sanctuary, how that affects things. So how, just real quickly, is membership doing with the applications that you see coming in?
So, as you know, we rolled out membership about 8 weeks ago. And I was very eager to see what the initial response would be, as that could have been an early indicator of whether or not we're going to see any impact in our membership due to the current situation. But, I'm really happy to report that the membership renewals are flowing in nicely. As of today, we have 481 renewals, I think was the last count for today. And this time last year, we had 498 renewals. So a difference of, I don't know, I think that's a difference of 17 renewals year over year for the same time period. So all in all, I think that's pretty good. Not too much of a spread from last year at this time. And, we have reminder emails going out weekly to those who have not yet renewed. And what's really nice is that we have 8 new plus givers and 10 families who have upgraded their plus giving level. So, those are great signs. But, year over year, we're pretty much right on pace, right on par with where we were last year. And it's very nice to see. But again, please get your membership renewal in ASAP.
Great. Thank you, Ron. And thank you, everyone. We'll wrap it up so we can get to Minion. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. If we did not get to your questions, I have them in the chat. We'll save them, and we will answer them in the next weekly email with the updates. So we will get to all your questions. And please don't hesitate to email me or Ron or Rabbi Peltz with any additional questions that you may have. As Ron said, this is the first of potentially one or many programs. We will continue to be transparent and answer questions and update you as things change and we get more information so that we can share that with you. And I thank, like I said, thank you for your questions. I thank everybody for joining us. And then I'll just finally wrap up with saying thank you to Ron, the professional staff, all the clergy, Rabbi Peltz, Alex, Ellen, everybody in the ECEC who have really just been doing a tremendous job since March. It's nonstop hard work, and you're doing a fantastic job. And I know I appreciate it, and I know the congregation appreciates it as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and we will see you soon.